You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Head on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and with me as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Although, I don't know, we're pretty big enemies this week with our big argument between Gorilla and whatever your creature is.
My creature is the apex predator of the entire North, being completely honest, and probably the most dangerous creature outside of man in the Northern Hemisphere.
I thought you and I talked about this. Mosquito.
Northern Hemisphere, my friend. Not the equator. So, especially on the coastal region of Alaska, the Kodiak bears, I've been just doing research on that, man. 1.5 thousand pounds. Over 9 feet tall. Absolutely incredible. However, I did discover today, have you ever heard of the Harper eagle?
I have not.
Okay, I got in a discussion with my friend, like, if you could have any animal, that could be essentially like a Pokemon or something, like kind of your buddy, what would you pick? And I'm like, well, a bear would be cool, but I kind of want something with flight and like that hunting ability with not as big, and obviously having to feed and clean up after a bear is not great. The Harper eagle has talons the size of grizzly's claws, and it is the largest predatory eagle, and it's like found in Peru, and they just like snatch monkeys and like sloths out of trees. They're absolutely incredible, and they have like huge like feathers that look like a crown on their head. So I'll have to share that too. They're incredible. I do like me some birds. Yeah, birds of prey are awesome.
I mean, if I could have a superpower, I'd want to fly.
Mine would be infinite knowledge, because then I could make myself fly with the bending of physics and time.
I see.
So, yeah, I know. It's a cheat.
If I could have one wish, it'd be a million wishes.
Infinite knowledge of the universe. Yep. Take a little bit of mystery out of it, but whatever. I would be the best general manager ever. I'd put it towards something menial like that. Never late for the bus. I have infinite knowledge of the universe. But things are going well here. This is our second chance here with Audacity. We also have Total Recorder now that we're using, so we had a little bit of issues with Audacity there at the end. Took a little finagling on my end, but it's good. And also we kept it short last time, so we should probably just, get going.
Let's do it. All right. Well, if you want to see our Twitter argument that we've been having, and if you want to weigh in on it, of course, you can find us on Twitter, me at Carl Dumler MHH and Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can follow the podcast's Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com, a new affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media.
Fantasy football fans, listen up. Do you want to join the biggest NFL season-long tournament ever? Of course you do. If you love fantasy football, and if you're listening to this podcast, odds are you do, then you need to enter the $3.5 million Best Ball Championship on Draft. That's right. $3.5 million in cold, hard cash. It's frickin' huge. It's season-long, but with no management. Just set it and forget it. Once you're done drafting, that's it. No trades, no waiver wire, no work on your end. You don't even have to set your lineup. Your best player gets automatically started and you'll get the best score every week, guaranteed. It's available on the App Store and Google Play or online at draft.com. For a limited time only, you can get a free entry into the Best Ball Championship when you make your first deposit. But you have to use my promo code HUDDLE. That's right, a free shot at $1 million just by using my promo code HUDDLE when you make your first deposit on Draft. Just search Draft in the App Store or go to draft.com and come play for free. Again, using that promo code HUDDLE.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, Carl. Welp, Scouts Eye preview here. This will be up Saturday, but this will be following joint practices taking off, I believe, tomorrow. We're recording this on Thursday, but 49ers and Broncos, it's honestly becoming a pretty solid relationship there between the two teams. You got John Lynch and John Elway, pretty good friends. And they've had some friendly dealings, Kapri Bipps one way, then we got DeKoda Watson coming back another way, and Rich Scangarello, which apparently the 49ers were blocking from pretty much everybody, but the Broncos were afforded the opportunity to bring him in if they pushed Joe Woods that way. So really just a budding relationship here between these two organizations, these two proud organizations. So I guess Elway's forgiven them for one of those Super Bowl beatdowns in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, you got to let the past be the past, I guess. And it's nice that these two teams can come together like this. It's kind of crazy, like I said, all the connections that these two teams have, not only players, but coaches, GMs, scouts, everything. They kind of seem to just borrow from each other. It seems
not
like.
The best over the last 3 seasons.
Right. I mean, maybe we should find a better partner for some of this, but still, I mean, it's nice to see them have a good partnership, and it makes these practices nice. Although it's going to be interesting just to see. I mean, both defenses have been practicing against this same offense all off season, so some of that kind of weighs in. You kind of like to see sometimes a little bit different than what you've been doing come in, but I mean, it's still great to see that teams can get these done, because it's almost like an extra couple preseason games to get your team ready, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, it really is. And these teams, the players, from what I understand, really enjoy these combined practices because they just get so tired of going up against the same player and their teammate day after day, week after week in practice. So getting a chance to go after somebody else in the practice setting is just a really welcome sight. So these are always great, and you always get a lot of good storylines from this. And also something I like about it is it's a zero-sum game during practices when a side does well, right? Like if the defense is killing it, well, that either means that the defense is great or the offense is bad. It's no matter what, you're probably not great unless it's head-to-head and a lot of back and forth going on, which hasn't been really the case in Broncos practice so far. However, the offense has been picking it up a little bit, which great. But when you go up against another team in these open practices, or I guess a practice with another team, then you actually can start to really get an idea of where you stand, right? So like they're not as familiar with you. You can kind of get these different concepts in there. So I'm just excited to hear the news from it, and really hoping for no injuries. That's honestly the biggest takeaway. But combined practice, I absolutely love it. It's probably honestly my favorite part of the entire preseason, even more than the preseason games. Right.
Usually, actually, the game after the joint practices, they take a lot of starters out because they feel like they've seen enough in the 2 games or the 2 practices, which are essentially games before that. So it's definitely a good time, good evaluation just to be able to see yourself against other teams and to see where you rank in some of this kind of stuff. And like you said, I mean, the 49ers have not been great. Broncos have not been great. Yeah. But you still want to be better than the bad. And that's kind of where your starting point is for some of this. And like I said, you get against some different players. You get to try a few different things that other guys have been working on against you.
Yeah, 18
how
now,
many practices? 17
maybe.
Practices now? So 18? Okay. I mean, we're recording this on Thursday, so just so everybody kind of has a clue of when we're doing this. And so, yeah, I mean, these are very valuable practices, and it's just going to be interesting to see how these two coaches go about it. I mean, you got one that's a great defensive mind, one's a great offensive mind. One's that the young gun that's coming in, hoping to be that next guy that really establishes himself. The other is the old guy that's been waiting for his opportunity. I mean, like I said, there's just so many storylines that tie into all of this, and it's just I'm very, very excited for all this.
Yeah, it's always a good time, and again, it's a pretty solid relationship budding between the two organizations, which you can kind of get away with when you're not in the same division or even the same conference. So excited to see what comes of it, the storylines that come, and again, everything else is, cherry on top, but everybody just please stay healthy. That's the big thing. Broncos can't afford any more injuries, especially in a goddamn practice. Mm-hmm. So, all right, well, I guess kick it off here. We're going to be talking about a couple questions. You did the outline for this one this week, but are these practices more or less valuable than a regular season camp practice? Or regular training camp practice? I would say more valuable, right? It's got to be more valuable. Like the reason I talked about, you're going up against somebody else, you're not as familiar, and you can really test your mettle, and these players just love to go out there and hit somebody else.
Well, you think about, like, offensive linemen. They're facing the same guys who probably use about the same 3 or 4 moves, unless you're Von Miller and have every move available to you. And so you kind of get used to what they're trying to do. For pass rushers, you understand what your offensive linemen are trying to do. So actually going against somebody else different is definitely a good thing. And like you said, I mean, it's just, these are usually some of the more intense practices because you don't want to be the team that when the media is reporting on it says, oh man, this team got smoked. I mean, I don't know. Do you watch Hard Knocks?
I have not watched Hard Knocks. I've watched it in the past, but past few seasons, not as much. I don't know. I get it's the entertainment factor, but I'm just so in love with the actual game itself that I don't even the storylines and the stuff around it. It's okay, but the actual game on the field is what I'm entrenched in. That's hence why I became a draft analyst. You know, I'm watching football Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, and heck, at some point I might even get into high school football. Who the heck knows? But it's just the storyline stuff. I feel like it's just kind of drummed up in some drama, so never been that into it.
It is. But, I mean, I guess I watched it just – I mean, it's the Raiders. Broncos are going to be playing the Raiders week 1, so you kind of want to get a little something from it. But, I mean, just watching their joint practice with the Rams. I mean, the Rams were Super Bowl contenders last year, obviously. I mean, they made it to the Super Bowl. So, much better team, but it was easy to see the difference between the talent level.
Yeah.
And just to see – I mean, the Raiders got smoked, especially that first day. Just drops. Guys not being in the right spot, just getting ran over. And so, again, you don't want to be that team that has the media just panicking, because then as fans, we all start panicking a little bit. And so, yeah, I mean, these are a pride issue for a lot of players. And I really am. I'm just excited because there's a lot of great individual matchups that we're going to talk about here just a little bit, and some unit matchups that I think really help prepare the Broncos for a lot more of what they're going to be going through this season compared to maybe some of the players that they have on their own team. So it is. It's just nice to see some other strengths and weaknesses come in so you can kind of start game planning offensively and defensively how you're going to attack teams.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I'm excited for this one, man. The Hall of Fame game came. Obviously, you're excited for football, but the product was not great in we'll call it week 2 of the preseason, the third game for the Broncos. But that game, as well as the one next week against the Rams, those are the ones that I'm all about, because we get a much better idea about how these players are going to stack up this season. Obviously, the play calling is vanilla, not everybody's in sync with each other yet, but really you're getting a taste of real football with these starters getting so many minutes. So I'm stoked. I cannot wait about it. Today I woke up, I tweeted it today, but I went out for my pre-work workout at like 5 a.m., right? And I left the apartment, walk into the workout facility, and it was like 59 degrees, and I could just smell football, you know? So I'm just stoked. I'm raring to go.
I get that. I walked out to take out the trash the other day.
The Raiders, you mean?
Well, yes, of course. But my daughter was following after me, and I said, hey, stay inside. It's actually a little chilly out here. And she came out and she's like, ooh, Dad, it is cold. I'm like, thank you. I mean, thanks for listening. Really appreciate that. But no, I mean, it is. It's kind of nice to get that little feeling. I mean, I'm sure it'll warm up some. It's still only August.
It's going to be 90 next week here.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's Midwest weather. For any of you that live here in the Midwest with us, you understand. I mean, it's snowing one day, flip-flop weather the next day. So we're here for it. But it does start finally feeling like football now. And these guys, I mean, it's starting to get down to the nitty-gritty. I was listening to, I think, Artie Stapleton earlier today, and he was just talking about it where, like, early on in training camp, Joe Flacco was struggling a lot, and he said it seems like that switch has just flipped for him. Like, he knows football's getting close. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden, he's just really amped himself up in practice and what he's doing out there. And so, I mean, it seems like the players are feeling it. The fans are feeling it. The coaches feeling it. Everybody's feeling it. So it's exciting that it's finally back. And I mean, but let's get into some matchups here that are really kind of exciting us or at least interest us in this practice that maybe some of these players are not seeing so far in training camp, or at least in the games or anything like that. And I'll start off with my first one here, and it is Dalton Risner versus Buckner. DeForest Buckner. This guy, I think he's one of the most underrated players in the NFL right now.
Top 5 interior pass rusher.
Right. He is on a terrible team, so he doesn't get the recognition of some of those other guys. Chris Jones. I mean, you obviously got the reigning defensive player of the year.
Fletcher Cox.
All those kind of, right. Fletcher Cox, those kind of guys. But DeForest Buckner, he's up there with a lot of those guys.
Yeah. He's so huge.
And so, like, Dalton Risner, he's going to have some tough matchups this year, obviously going against Chris Jones a couple times. And so, really, this is the best time for him to prepare for that, because he's going to get a lot of work against Buckner.
Yeah.
The Broncos, I like their defensive line, but they don't have anybody that's near what Buckner is.
No way.
And so, again, for Reisner, I mean, we've been hearing lots of positive reviews of what this guy's bringing to the Broncos and how he's looking as a rookie and how he is as a leader and all those kind of things. But this is the biggest test that he's going to have faced so far. And so if he can pass this test and still look good against a guy like Buckner, to me, that just goes all the more just to securing that this guy was just such a home run pick for the Broncos.
Yeah, I am a huge fan of DeForest Buckner's game. And the thing that's crazy about him is that his height, he's 6'7", 300 pounds, but he plays with leverage, right? Like typically guys that big, offensive linemen, you can just go at the ankles, you can win that leverage battle and kind of root them out, but he really plays with solid pad level considering his size and the arm length. I mean, 35-inch arm length. He could probably, honestly, if he came to the NFL or played football 15 years ago, no doubt in my mind, he'd have been playing offensive tackle. That's the kind of guy, and that's what we're seeing in the NFL. Offensive tackles, those kind of athletes with the length and everything, are playing the defensive line because that's where the money is. Their offensive linemen are getting paid too, but there's just more money on the defensive side of the ball for those big guys. But he's awesome, super strong, really can displace guys, split doubles. He's a good enough athlete to do everything. I mean, he can play 5-tech, 4-tech, 4-eye, 3, even some 1-tech. So I'm a really big fan of his game. He's not Fletcher Cox. He's not Aaron Donald. He's not Chris Jones, but right there with the rest of them. I mean, you got like Akeem Butler and Geno Atkins after that as well. So, man, a really good player. And I tweeted it today as well. Welcome to the NFL, Dalton Reisner, because this is really going to let you know what he's going to be this first season. Obviously, I think he's going to be solid no matter what. But if he can be really good right away, how he matches up against DeForest Buckner, and he won't be doing it alone. DeForest Buckner is too good that they're going to leave him one-on-one too often, especially with Nick Bosa being injured. So he's going to get some help, but still, man, Buckner is a freak, and man, such a good player. I remember last year, I think it was against the Vikings, in the first half, he had like 2 tackles for loss and 2 sacks in 2 quarters, just absolutely dismantling Kirk Cousins. Now, the Vikings offensive line was very poor, but, still, freak of nature, really fun player, and man, it's going to be interesting, right? Like, I'm not sure how long DeForest Buckner will play, but I almost want to see him go up against Drew Lock, because something in college Drew Lock struggled with. He was fine with edge pressure, but guys in his face really made him panic. So that's what Buckner brings. And also another aspect of Buckner's game is being 6'7", 35-inch arm length. He gets his hands up a lot, and the Broncos have had issues with balls batted down at the line of scrimmage in camp so far. So I'm really watching for that to see if that's a continuing issue against another team.
All right, well, who's your first matchup that you are very excited to see?
Well, I guess I am. It's a love-hate thing. It's the Broncos' pretty much team effort. It's going to take the linebackers and the safeties and the cornerbacks, but everybody trying to slow George Kittle down. It was a few years ago. It might have even been last year. Was it last year the Broncos played the Bears in the combined practices? I believe it was.
Yep.
And Adam Shaheen and the other Bears tight ends were just absolutely just obliterating the Broncos in one of those days of practices, catching everything. They were pretty good the other days too. One of the days it just absolutely killed them. And then last year, I hate to bring it up, but I mean, George Kittle's probably still running. 7 receptions, 210 yards, a touchdown on 9 targets. I mean, God, he just absolutely killed them last year. And last year, George Kittle also led the NFL in yards after catch from a flipping tight end. I don't think that's ever happened before. Dude, I mean, what a great player and a great blocker too. So I'm really curious to see how these Broncos, the linebackers, the safeties, and cornerbacks too, will match up against George Kittle, because not only he can get after it in the trenches, but obviously he's a great receiver as well. He can run deep, he can catch it and make plays after the catch. So this is going to be a big test for them, and I'm curious. Todd Davis isn't playing. Josie Jewell should be good to go, but they might take it easy with him. Obviously, Joseph Jones out, so the likes of Watson and Hollins and Alexander, they're going to have their hands full, as well as the safeties as well. So, man, tight end. In the Broncos, it's kind of like offensive line depth. Everybody complains about the offensive line depth. Well, that's a league-wide issue. Same with tight end. Covering tight ends there's no bigger mismatch in the NFL than a linebacker covered one-on-one in space, right? That's why teams want to get those guys there. Flash out the tight end, flash out the fullback, flash out the running back. If you can get a one-on-one versus a linebacker, unless that dude is goddamn Luke Kuechly, Deion Jones, or Bobby Wagner, or just a freak, that's a huge win. So that's the big matchup for me this week, and how the Broncos, middle of the defense, can handle covering a guy like that. Obviously, the scheme change is going to be a part of that. More zone, more matchup zone, more communication. That's going to be a big thing. Less man, so you don't have to worry about Todd Davis going over Sammy Watkins in the slot and playing man coverage versus a goddamn wide receiver. I'm still really upset about that. But
what, really?
That was unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, tip of the cap. Andy Reid, one of the best offensive minds in football. Game management, that's a whole different thing entirely, but the scheme is top notch. It always has been. He's a great offensive mind for a walrus. But yeah, no, I'm really excited and nervous to see George Kittle, and obviously, pull for him being an Iowa Hawkeye, and I'm going to be that guy. It does just add a little bit of salt to the wound that he was the pick right after Drake Butt. Hindsight 2020, every team passed on George Kittle a couple times. Nobody thought he would be this, and also people thought Jake Butt would be great. I was more excited about Jake Butt. I thought he'd be better than Kittle, being an Iowa fan. But still, man, makes you a little bit sad. So I don't know. It's probably one of the things I'm most interested in this entire week of practice.
I just keep thinking the 49ers have two players that I think had two of the best individual weaponry performances against the Broncos in the last 5 years. You got George Kittle with his incredible game last year. Tevin Coleman back in 2016. Oh, yeah. You remember that game? Yep, I mean, that wheel route was just deadly. You were talking about trying to find those mismatches against the linebackers. The Falcons did so good at that. And it's crazy. It's the exact same offense that that beat us both times. I mean, same offensive coordinator both times.
Yep.
So, I mean, just, again, shows the craziness of what Kyle Shanahan can bring to the table and hopefully what Scangarello can bring for the Broncos this year. Yeah.
I cannot disagree with you in the slightest. So, it's a really interesting 49ers team. So, we'll talk about their depth chart here soon. It's an interesting depth chart.
It is.
And how much are you putting in? I know this is not following the outline here, but how much are you putting in the Jimmy Garoppolo throwing 5 interceptions in a row narrative? I have a lot of 49ers Twitter and just NFL Twitter in general was freaking out when that came out yesterday.
Oh, I do think some people have hyped up Jimmy Garoppolo a little bit more than they probably should.
Yeah.
Just because when he was healthy, they won so many games.
And the Patriots connection as well, I think.
Right. I mean, so I do think there's some of that. But I also, to me, training camp interceptions. I mean, do you remember last year with Patrick Mahomes and everybody going crazy about all of his interceptions? Yeah. I mean, it's teams are trying different things. Quarterbacks are trying different things. I remember Peyton Manning throwing a lot of interceptions during training camp because he said, I'm trying to see what works, what doesn't. If it doesn't work during training camp, then I won't try it during the season. But this is the time to try things. So, again, I'm not worried about it. I guess if I was a 49ers fan, I wouldn't be that worried about it yet. I mean, they've got a great offensive mind in Kyle Shanahan that'll put them in advantageous position. I do think that they have a pretty decent group of weaponry around him. I mean, the addition of Tevin Coleman, obviously George Kittle is one of the best tight ends in football.
Save it. That's one of my advantages coming up.
Yep. Let's save that. But again, I mean, I think he'll be fine.
Yeah.
And it'll be a good matchup this week for the Broncos just to face a different quarterback other than Joe Flacco and Drew Lock and all of them. So, yeah, I mean, it'll be fun. But my next matchup that I'm excited about, and it's two guys that they're kind of at the downhill part of their career, but they're both looking for a really big bounce back season this year. And you got and both of them are coming off injury too. You got Emmanuel Sanders versus Richard Sherman. And I mean, the Broncos almost had this matchup back in 2013. They got Sanders the next year after Eric Decker left, of course. But I remember Sherman just shutting down Decker. That was just crazy how much. I mean, Decker couldn't even get off the line of scrimmage. Yeah. And I've heard Richard Sherman's looking more like his old self since he's kind of coming back. I think, did he have an Achilles injury?
I believe so, yes.
So, I mean, Sanders coming back from an Achilles injury, Sherman coming back from an Achilles injury. It'll just be fun to see those two because you got two technicians of the game, two guys that when they're at the top of their game, I mean, both of them could be considered top 15 players at their position right now. So it'll just be kind of fun to see those two get some time. And I mean, it's just kind of veteran versus veteran you always kind of like to see what they can do.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there. That's a great matchup. And Richard Sherman isn't what he used to be. Granted, when you don't have Earl Thomas playing behind you, and they got the pass rush that the Seahawks had there, that's going to happen. Also, Father Time's always going to get there. I used to really not like Richard Sherman. He kind of rubbed me the wrong way, but I've grown to appreciate his intellect. He's obviously a very retrospective, introspective person. So
he's not as, what I would say,
annoying.
In your face, boisterous. Yeah. As
granted, he's not great anymore. So it's less annoying when you're not great.
Right. But you're right. I mean, when you actually read what he has to say, you sit there and go, okay, if you're just looking at the words and don't pay attention to who said them, you're going, this was very intelligent.
Yeah, I would like to have a cup of coffee with him and just talk about football and life for a while. He's a pretty intelligent dude. Obviously, Stanford, it's going to happen. So, all right, well, my next big one, I'm going to stick with the tight end narrative here, but actually it's going to be Fant for me. Fant is probably, outside of Sanders, the Broncos' most explosive pass weapon, and they're really going to need him to step up this year, and he's been getting a little bit better every week. He said the game is slowing down for him, and he's been pretty darn good as a blocker, but what we need to see is more of that pass-catching stuff, whether it be yards after the catch or even some deep shots. So Fant versus what is a decently solid 49ers linebacker core. I mean, they spent incredible money on Quan Alexander, which is insane considering the injury he was coming off. I believe he had an ACL and still got that big money. And then Fred Warner, one of my favorites from the draft 2 years ago, is manning the middle linebacker. And also Malcolm Smith, who wasn't Malcolm Smith the Super Bowl MVP in 2013?
Yep.
Okay. Screw him. I hate him. The worst person. No, I'm just kidding. But they have some athleticism and coverage and versatility there at that linebacker group. They're a 4-3 defense in base. Obviously, you're going to see more nickel and dime in today's NFL, but they have speed, athleticism all across that Mike group. So seeing how Fant can match up against those guys, if he can even let the athleticism outshine against those guys, that's a really big test for me. So I like their linebackers a fair amount, and obviously Fant going up there is big. And also Fant, the establishing, chemistry with Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco hitting the running backs a lot last week. Let's see that tight end game open up a little bit. I know some people are a little bit concerned with Fant, but I think he's going to have a fine year. I really do. Obviously, the big boom is coming probably 2020, 2021, just the tight end learning curve. But still, the Broncos offense needs Fant to be a dude this year. Even if he's not making, Gronkowski level targets and catches and everything, he needs to be a dude. So he's one that I'm really looking forward to in what is a decently solid linebacker group for the 49ers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. The Broncos definitely need him to be something.
Yeah.
Red zone threat, third down threat, something. And it does seem like he's starting to get it a little bit. But this will definitely be the biggest test he's faced. I mean, I guess the Seahawks had pretty good linebackers.
They didn't start any other starters, though.
Right. So this will be that first, those two practices actually going against some of these top guys for them that are very good in coverage, very good in the run. I mean, just very, very solid unit compared to Broncos right now, barely putting a unit together.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see if Jewel is back, and I've been decently impressed. Obviously, I wrote that article with Johnson, and Hollins, I think, is showing more than I thought he would as an off-ball linebacker early. I still think probably that's more towards the future when we're going to really know there, but still, it's definitely going to be interesting there, and I'm excited not only for the game, but just to hear what's going on in the practices. So we're going to take a quick break. Make sure you guys don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast. Today we're doing the Scout's Eye preview for the preseason Week 2 game against the San Francisco 49ers, talking about the practice, talking about the game coming up on Monday. And you guys have two and a half days to listen to this to be prepared for that game. Obviously, this will be out Saturday, so Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So hopefully that's enough time. But I want to just talk about more of an overall part of this roster here for both teams. And I got to ask you, Carl, what unit for the Broncos, just the matchup that excites you the most to watch and evaluate this week?
I guess I would say the Broncos offensive line versus the 49ers defensive line.
Yeah.
If you're looking at the strength of the 49ers defense, to me it is that defensive line. I don't think Dee Ford's playing this week.
Yeah, and nor is Bosa's probably
Nick
not
Bosa.
either.
So, I mean, there's a little bit of, I guess, I'm a little disappointed that they're not going to be out there because that is such a great test for the Broncos.
Yeah.
But you still got Buckner. You still got Armstead. You still got your boy Solomon Thomas.
Yeah.
I've heard he's looking a little bit better this year.
Good.
So we'll see how that goes. Sheldon Day is another kind of big guy up there in the middle.
I really liked DJ Jones coming out.
Yep, I did too.
And I was a fan of Contravious Street, who unfortunately tore his ACL or Achilles before the draft, but still went in the 5th round. He's an absolute just freak. He was actually the opposite edge of Bradley Chubb at NC State.
That he was. So, but anyway, I mean, it's still a good matchup for these guys to really test them against some different kinds of talent. I mean, they've got a mix of power guys, speed guys, power and speed guys like Buckner. And so, yeah, I mean, all guys will be tested. Like I said, it's more that interior defensive line that has me excited for the Broncos just going up against them, and because they do have some pass rush options compared to the Broncos. I mean, I know we got Shelby Harris, but we need to see what he actually looks like for an entire season before I'm ready to crown him a true interior pass rusher. And so, I mean, that is, for me, just such a good matchup. I think it's one, I mean, we might actually try to talk about this here another time, but there's been a lot of people out there actually rating the Broncos offensive line much higher than probably you or I would rate them.
Yeah, right? We should definitely talk about that at some point. Maybe not today, but next week we got a couple slots open. So that's something I definitely want to talk about. I know, man, Chad and Zach are killing it on the other podcast, but there's so much I want to talk about. I almost wish we could do 3 podcasts a week. I know we don't have time, right? Like, Carl, you're a father and full time, like, and I don't have time either. Getting ready for the wedding and everything. But dang, like, so much I want to talk about. I could talk. Right. We could make this a 3-hour podcast. Chad probably thinks we do.
Is that what you want? Yeah, I know. But no, I mean, I guess for you then, what's your group that you're excited about?
I'm really excited to see this Broncos secondary versus the 49ers weapons. Now, the 49ers weapons in the past game are pretty unproven outside of Kittle and pretty young, but the Broncos secondary is also pretty, it's new. It's new out there. It's a new scheme, and you got guys like Kareem Jackson, who's, I think, practiced today, and it looks like he should be good to go, which is going to be a much-needed guy back there. Simmons in this new role. Hopefully he can get an interception if Garoppolo's handing him out like candy on Halloween. And Callahan as well, whose foot has been an issue. It's something that has me concerned, but even then, the Broncos are going to have to match up in a multitude of ways against these 49ers weapons. And I will say, I do like the Broncos' youth and whatnot at the wide receiver. I do want better weapons. It's something I'm about this offseason, but man, the 49ers have really stacked up a fair amount of weapons that are interesting players. I mean, Dante Pettis I think he's the all-time kickoff return leader as far as like punts, like touchdowns, right? Like all-time special teams touchdowns from kicks and punt returns. Fun player there. A lot of good releases. They got Deebo Samuel, who's a lot of fun. Jordan Matthews, who's a big slot. And then they have other weapons on the other side. Marquise Goodwin, fastest player in the NFL apparently. Maybe Tyreek Hill is probably faster, but Marquise Goodwin just won the 40-yard dash challenge this offseason. He runs legit sub 4.25 speed, which is insane. I mean, really incredible speed. Richie James, another kind of small, shifty guy. I think went to Middle Tennessee State. And then Jalen Hurd, who I'm really interested in, played running back at Tennessee along with Alvin Kamara, and they were really a big fan of his game. And he transferred to Baylor and played wide receiver, and the big wide receiver. I think he's like 6'4", 230 pounds or something. And that big slot yak guy who's just, if he gets the ball and has some momentum and he gets matched up against a safety or a cornerback, I mean, he's making that guy miss, or he's lowering the shoulder and hurting them. So a lot of fun weapons there. And that doesn't even get to the running backs and fullbacks. I mean, Tevin Coleman, a guy who can catch the ball. I really like Jeff Wilson in that regard coming out. And the best fullback in the entire NFL, and Kyle Juszczyk, who is, I mean, just a super weapon for that 49ers team. Good blocker, but where he really makes his chops is a receiver. And then, of course, George Kittle as well. So I like a lot of these young weapons for the 49ers, and they are really going to test not only the starters in the Broncos unit, but because they have invested so much in it, we're going to see the depth as well. I mean, a lot of these guys are going to be playing second and third team because they've invested so much in these young players on the 49ers side. So these weapons, they're good. They're multiple. They're different. And we're going to get to know this Broncos depth in the secondary.
I just finished an article, I think it came out today actually, where I talked about Marquise Goodwin being one of the best tests for the Broncos because it does prepare him for actually a guy like Tyreek Hill. I mean, there's not many teams in the NFL that have a guy with that kind of speed. And so when they can have that for 2 straight days of practice, they can kind of mix and match, try to figure out how they can cover that kind of speed. Because, I mean, it's not only that they have Tyreek Hill, but, of course, they added Hardman in the offseason through the draft, and there's just so much speed on that Chiefs team. So, again, this is such a good test when this is a team that has some speed, has some quickness, has a variety of weapons. And so for the Broncos, yeah, this will be a great week just to see where the secondary is at, how far they've come, and what they need to do to be able to prepare for teams like that. Because it's not only the Chiefs, but I think of the Chargers. They have a lot of weapons on that team. And, I mean, the Raiders, I don't want to give them too much credit, but if Antonio Brown ever actually gets healthy, I mean, he's still a top 10 receiver in the NFL. We'll see how that all plays out, that whole situation. I don't even want to get into that, but that's just kind of crazy. But, I mean, and they added some other weapons. Was it Tyrell Williams? Is that another guy they added?
The Raiders, yes. They added Tyrell Williams, who's a 6'4" guy he's pretty underrated. Pretty good player.
So, again, I mean, this is kind of a good test for the Broncos because as much as I think our young weapons can do some different things, it's still not a finished product, and I don't think that they are going to challenge our defense as much as some of these other teams can. And so, again, that's just a great test for them just to kind of say, okay, we got to step up our game, or, hey, we're really there.
Yep. No, you are absolutely correct there, and I think the Broncos definitely took steps in the right direction of the secondary. But still, I mean, a lot of those guys are question marks still. Chris Harris Jr. is probably the only one I feel great about, right? Like, the rest of them I feel good about, but great, solid. This is going to answer a lot of questions. So this is a solid 49ers weapons group. I mean, it's been an issue for a couple years now, and they've been really attacking it in the draft. So not only that, but Kyle Shanahan, I mean, how he's going to mix and match all these guys and distribute touches is a storyline that I'm really interested in this year. So yeah, no, it's going to be a great matchup, not only for the Broncos secondary, but the linebackers as well. So I'm excited about it.
All right, well, let's switch topics here a little bit and just look at each team's roster, and let's figure out maybe a position for each team that they have a bigger advantage just in comparing. Like for me, my very first big advantage is Broncos secondary compared to the 49ers secondary. And, I mean, I'm just looking at these two units. And for the 49ers, Richard Sherman, very much a shell of himself last year. We'll see how much he's recovered. Akello Witherspoon is their other big cornerback that they have. I mean,
Colorado.
He is, but he's okay. I wouldn't say he's all of a sudden this great player. Jason Verrett, if he's healthy, maybe he could be something. But beyond that, I mean, their safeties are not a great combo. I think they combined for 2 interceptions last year.
Yeah.
Between their safeties. I mean, it was just not a great group, which makes me laugh when I hear about that 5 interception day.
Yeah.
Or 5 straight interceptions. And you're going, with this unit, really? And so then for the Broncos, when they're coming in with Chris Harris, top 5 cornerback, I mean, Kareem Jackson, it sounds like he's going to be healthy again. So, I mean, he's had some pretty good practices lately. Bryce Callahan, if he's healthy, we'll see. Justin Simmons has been a turnover machine so far in practice. Will Parks, I mean, the coaches have been raving about that guy lately. And even when you start getting deeper into our roster here, I mean, we talked about it last week. Bosby and Yadam, both of them, guys that have really stepped up, look like they belong. Stuart Cravens looks like he belongs. So I'm looking at this unit and I'm saying the Broncos have, if you're lining up these rosters, this is one of the strengths compared to the 49ers. So who would be your first group then?
Well, I just wanted to come up with some contrarian ones for you, but the Broncos, I would say they're running backs. Probably, I like Tevin Coleman, but the 49ers have okay running backs. I mean, Bredia had a solid season last year, and they also have Jared McKinnon, who I believe is still injured, but I'm going to go with Philip Lindsay and Royce Freeman. You know, especially Philip Lindsay. The running backs for the 49ers last year was a major injured part for that team. So I'm going to go with that. But also I think the interior offensive line for the 49ers is not not up to snuff as well. And obviously McGovern's been struggling, Leary, injured, but I'm not super impressed with them. Laken Tomlinson, former first-round pick, but I think from Duke, but only been okay. Their right guard is Mike Person. They have Joshua Garnett, a late first-round pick from Stanford, as the backup, which is interesting. That's one reason. One reason I'm not always about taking an interior offensive line early is because it's a risk analysis, right? So, like, if you get a Quentin Nelson, okay, that's great. But if you miss on that interior offensive line with a first-round pick, it's going to hurt much more. And that guy's, backup 6 offensive lineman quality. It's going to hurt much more than taking a cornerback or a pass rusher, a defensive lineman, or even a wide receiver. So, back up there. And then, do you know who their center is?
Ben Garland.
Ben Garland, absolutely. And also, just third string.
That's given because Richburg is on the PUP.
Yeah, I know. But still, pretty interesting. And do you see who their third string center is? You probably won't remember this guy.
Dylan Day?
Dylan Day, yeah. Do you remember him? I think he tried to get on the Broncos a couple of times. He was the one who wore the light blue contacts like crazy. He might have gotten injured too, but he looks insane with like these White Walker blue contacts. I'm pretty sure that was him. That would have been, gosh, I remember listening about that and reading about that when I was living at my old apartment, so probably 3-4 years ago.
He had the golden locks of hair.
Ah, yes.
You remember that?
Yes.
Oh, man.
Crazy.
Beautiful hair.
Hair game strong.
No, he was on the Broncos practice squad back in 2017. And I think ended up, some team later on in the year ended up signing him onto their 53-man roster. Yeah. So that's how the Broncos ended up losing him.
Yeah. Nope, you're right. I'm also excited to see Mitch Wishnowsky, the punter that they took. I think it was 5th round. He's from Australia. I think he legitimately just straight from Australia. So that'll be interesting. Guys, I don't scout punters. So as much as I, complain about the Broncos punt game, don't really watch it so much in college, which is ironic being an Iowa fan. So, but for me, it's got to be running back. I really believe in Lindsey and Freeman this year. And I would have even believed it more if they still had Theo Riddick, but unfortunately Kevin Hogan killed him. So for 6 to 8 weeks, he's going to be back from the dead, but 6 to 8 weeks. As far as my biggest advantage for the 49ers, I kind of touched on it already, so I won't take too long, but they're just their pass-catching weapons. Tevin Coleman is a better receiving weapon than any of the Broncos running backs that are out of the backfield. Devontae Booker can be solid there, but, doesn't have the juice that Coleman has there. If Coleman can get it isolated against a linebacker or even a safety, yikes. You got George Kittle, who's top 3 tight end in football. And then as I touched on it, I really like this depth at the wide receiver position. I don't think they have a true number 1 at the wide receiver, but still, Pettis, Jordan Matthews, Deebo Samuel, Marquise Goodwin, Richie James Jr., Jalen Hurd, all these different types of guys. So I think that is a advantage the 49ers have over the Broncos, especially because Sanders isn't going to be playing this week. So as much as people are excited about Sutton, Hamilton, Patrick, Fant, and I'm forgetting one, Winfrey, the Broncos just don't match up as far as the talent level or the draft pedigree of those guys. Obviously, things can change. They're young players, but right now I'd say that the 49ers dwarf the Broncos in talent on the outside and variability on the outside.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, my group, part of this is because of Broncos injuries, but it's also because the 49ers just have more proven talent, and that is their linebacker core, their off-ball linebacker core. Quan Alexander, one of their big signings of the offseason. When he's healthy, very, very solid player there. Fred Warner, we've talked about it on this podcast. Broncos wanted that guy. Wasn't that the Royce Freeman pick?
Yes, it was. Yep, the Broncos. Yes. From what I was told, hearsay, what can you do? But I was told that the Broncos were legitimately on the phone with Fred Warner, ready to pick him, and then he gets another call, and the area code from the Bay Area, 49ers pick once before the Broncos. He said, "Sorry, John, I got to take this call." And the 49ers took him one pick before the Broncos. So what could have been? I'm better with Royce Freeman than I was when they took him. 3rd round is probably about as early as I'd care to go for a running back ever. But, man, Fred Warner would have been really good on this team. A really solid player, good in cover. Good in every phase. He's not a great blitzer or anything. He doesn't have a lot of power, but solid player, and I'm jealous. He'd have really helped them a lot. And you don't have Josie Jewell, then things would have changed. Who knows? But I really do like Fred Warner, and the Broncos were high on him as well.
Right. And so you got those two guys who are pretty entrenched starters that are very, very solid all the way around.
Yeah.
Malcolm Smith, I mean, beyond his one game that he had for the Seahawks in the Super Bowl, he's been kind of up and down throughout his career.
If you could have one game, though. Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, of course. Save your best game for the biggest game of your career.
He's probably playing in the league still because of that game.
Right. Oh, for sure. But even some of their backups are some guys that intrigue me a little bit. Elijah Lee, David Mayo.
Was he a Raider last year?
I think so.
Okay,
I feel like
so he's already bounced off.
But I mean, I've been hearing some decent things about some of these backups, and so just this unit. I mean, the starters alone.
Yeah.
Especially with Todd Davis down with injury. I mean, he'll be back for the season, and Josie Jewell just starting to get back to things. But I mean, it's been easy to see. Teams have picked on the Broncos so far in the 2 preseason games at the linebacker core. I mean, Paxton Lynch just had his career game because he just passed over the middle. He would do play action, throw over the top of our linebackers. And so, I mean, hey, take advantage of what you can. Find the weakness, do it, whatever. But again, I mean, that's just going to be an issue this year, especially if Todd Davis or Josie Jewell go down with injury for long term during the season. The Broncos just don't have much there. So I'll be keeping an eye on just those guys. I mean, you talked about it already of just Noah Fant getting a chance to match up against some better talent than what the Broncos have had him face so far in training camp. And so, I mean, they're just a better unit overall than what the Broncos have.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. And can we just reflect on how good those top, I think it was 5 linebackers were in that class in 2018? I mean, can you count them in order of as they were drafted?
So I'm trying to remember.
The first one went to the Chicago Bears.
Okay, so you got Roquan Smith.
The next one, I believe, went to the Buffalo Bills.
Edmonds.
Yeah, Tremaine Edmonds, not his brother Terrell.
Yeah, right. I was trying to remember which one, but I remember Edmonds for sure.
The next one went to the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh my goodness, why am I spacing on his name?
It's a very German name.
Yeah.
Leighton Vander Esch.
Yes, okay.
Vander Esch, yep. I mean, he was higher than Bradley Chubb was last year in the top 100, which is dumb. You know, the NFL top 100 is a joke, but still, guy's a freak. Absolutely just monster. Did you ever watch Blue Mountain State? I
haven't.
Okay. Well, I got to interview Leighton Vander Esch at the Combine, and he really reminded me of one of the characters from Blue Mountain State. I mean, he's a freak. 6'4", 255, and what is like 85th or better percentile on almost all the athletic tests. Questions about his mental processing, but still. And then the 4th linebacker taken was the Defensive Rookie of the Year,
Darius Leonard. And
then the 5th one was Fred Warner. To my knowledge, there could have been some in between Leonard and Warner. But those 5 right there, wow. What an incredible group. Right? Like, that's especially compared to last year where it was just, and I do think Cody Barton's going to be a solid player. Maybe Justin Hollins will come to be something, but after the Devons, it was just a sheer drop.
It's
early. We'll see.
You did forget one.
Who did I forget?
Rashaan Evans.
Yeah, but he's also kind of like an edge. They're playing him at how I think Hollins might be playing. He's kind of that stand-up, strong-side linebacker, come down in that 4-3 under look.
Yeah.
So, kind of like Mike Vrabel.
And they got some hybrid players. I mean, Uchenna Nwosu.
That's another hybrid one.
Lorenzo Carter.
Oh, yes. That's another hybrid one. He's pretty much, that's who I compared Justin Hollins to. A little better bend than Hollins had.
So, I mean, yeah, you got some hybrid guys there compared to the true off-ball linebackers.
Yeah.
But, they're definitely looking like a very, very good class there. Unfortunately, the Broncos
Jewell might turn out to be okay.
Right. I think he'll be a very good fit in what Fangio wants to do.
Much better fit with Fangio. I do wish his skill set didn't overlap so much with Davis, but still, the zone coverage stuff, used to it at Iowa, and I think he's a better fit there. So anyway, we should probably get back to the scouts. I was just lamenting about how good that linebacker group was.
Right. It was. But no, I mean, so the 49ers, they got a pretty solid unit there, and it's one that as a Bronco fan, just looking at the Broncos, I would definitely be a little bit jealous.
Yeah, but like we said last week, if you could be really good to great on two levels of the defense and only solid on the other. Probably rather have a great defensive line and a great secondary with mediocre linebackers. You can cover those guys up easier. Just ask Wade Phillips. So obviously it's better to have great players everywhere. Duh. But all right, well, we're going to take another break here. Guys, we will be right back for the Scouts Eye preview, on the Building the Broncos podcast. Stick around.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
And welcome back to the Building the Broncos podcast. I am Nick Kendell, along with Carl Dumler, and we're going to wrap things up here pretty soon. But we're going to talk about the game a little bit more. And Carl, I'm going to kick it off to you. The 3 players in the game and practice this week that you are most intrigued to follow and see how they do.
Well, I mean, the first one, it's got to be one of the more obvious ones, but Drew Lock.
Yeah.
I mean, the story is always going to be, until we see exactly what he is in the NFL, what is he? What is his development? I've been hearing a lot of good things. It was kind of interesting. I had this conversation with somebody earlier. I was listening to, I think it was Mason, Ryan Edwards, and Steve Atwater. I think I was listening to them. And Mason and Edwards were praising Drew Lock for some of the things he did. And you could tell, like, Steve Atwater still has some of that player mentality of, I hate rookies. And so, like, they were talking about the Fumagalli catch. And I mean, for me, how do you make that throw any better? Can you?
You throw it to the guy who's in the end zone. I don't know. You can't make it any better. Really, that was an incredible throw. Also, a great catch by Fumagalli. Got to give him some credit there.
Right. But Atwater all of a sudden stepped in because the other guys were praising Locke for a great throw, and he's like, "Oh no, it was just a great catch. It was an okay throw." And I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, that's just the player mentality of you just hate to give rookies any kind of credit." But no, I mean, it was just good to see that step that he took. Can you take that next step? And it sounds like, just listening to. Just paying attention to the tea leaves, I guess you could say, it does seem like Drew Lock has passed Hogan.
Yeah.
Or is right there on the edge of just pushing him off the roster. And so another good couple practices here, another good game. I think Drew Lock really cements himself as that number 2. And so this is a big week for him to really just show the coaches what he's got. And then my next guy, Garrett Bowles. I mean, again, another big storyline of we just need to see what he is. I've heard he's doing much better. The games I've watched, his feet look a little bit better. He's still a little bit late sometimes for guys getting around the edge.
I feel like he still leans.
He does. And so, I mean, just some of that where he's going to be facing some good pass rushers again, not just like what the Broncos are facing, or what the Broncos bring every week in practice, but he's going to have more of that. And so this is, again, another big week for him because, I mean, he's trying to cement himself as a guy that can really stay in this league. It's a very big make or break year for him. And so definitely want to see him. And then another guy, just because I want to get away from the starters completely, Trinity Benson. He made a great catch this last game. And I've heard from some people that in practice, he has just been getting open. Players are really hyping this guy up, saying that he's quick, he's strong, he's got long arms, all those kind of things. And it just hasn't quite translated over. I mean, you aren't hearing his name as much as you would like. But I just feel like he's one of those guys. This could be that week where he really bolts himself up that wide receiver depth chart to maybe be in that true 6th guy that they can keep. I'm surprised they haven't really used him on special teams a whole lot. I would love to see the Broncos put him back there because that was one of his specialties in college. But again, this is, I think, just a big week for him, make or break of whether he makes this roster or not. But who are your 3?
For me, I cheated a little bit. I have 3 Broncos and then 1 non-Bronco just for a reason I'll get to. But number 1, Kareem Jackson. I want to see this versatility. After watching the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Patriots in the Super Bowl, I became, I wouldn't say enamored, but very intrigued by a matchup kind of safety that has man coverage skills, can come down, still be physical, and really just take away things versatility-wise in that short pass game, and the middle of the field pass game from tight ends, slot receivers, running backs. And that guy was Malcolm Jenkins, who's one of the more underrated defensive backs in the last decade, honestly. He's been a really good player for a while. Former first-round pick from Ohio State, started his career at cornerback with the Saints, moved to safety. And, man, he's been a huge piece for that Philadelphia Eagles secondary and defense in general. So, Kareem Jackson, can he be that guy? How's he going to match up? Obviously, the middle of the field's been weak for the Broncos. I mean, even during the Wade Phillips years, they gave up a lot of passing yards to running backs and tight ends. That was their weakness. So, can Kareem Jackson fix that? I'm really interested by that. Alexander Johnson, another one, talking about the middle of the field. I just wrote about him. He's been pretty darn solid the first 2 games for the Broncos here. He's stepping up. Vic Fangio actually praised him, which, knowing the curmudgeon that is Vic Fangio, that means something, right? It's not just blowing smoke up everybody's butts. If you're getting praise from Vic Fangio, it means like, hey, you're doing a good job. So I'm excited to see what Alexander Johnson can do. However, he does come off as that classic thumper type of linebacker. You know, he's listed 6'2", 255, which I'll be shocked if he's 255. Honestly, cut that weight down, baby. You need to hopefully add a little bit of change of direction ability, maybe some burst as well. But 255, I'm curious to see if he can keep it up. You know, maybe put some pressure on both Jewell and Davis. He's Davis's backup, but I'd push those guys from behind. And he's played pretty solid, and I just want to see him make a little bit better reads. Some of his reads have been a little slow. Obviously, if you're a little bit of a slower linebacker, you need to be processing at a higher level. But really been a good player, and like we talked about, George Kittle, these passing weapons, the slot weapons, these linebackers are going to be tested. So I'm excited to see Alexander Johnson. And then probably number one for me, I'm going to go with Joe Flacco. He's going to get the most reps we've seen. We've only seen one series so far where he tossed it to the running backs a lot, and the running backs made some big plays on the ground. Offensive line was doing solid too. So really, I'm excited about just to see Joe Flacco and see if he can get something going through the air. I mean, the one real challenging pass he had, he threw it out of the back of the end zone in a red zone attempt. So that's gave me flashes to Case Keenum, which, give your guy a chance, right? I mean, obviously you don't want to throw an interception in that area, but it was not close. It didn't look close from the broadcast angle.
Right.
And then, finally, my last guy, which is, okay, sorry guys, I'm going to bring it to the NFL draft. I gots to. But Jalen Hurd, I'm very much about getting speed for this Broncos offense. They're, replacing Sanders probably after next season. Who knows what's going to happen? Maybe they'll end up re-signing him just because they figure they can't live life without him. But I'm really excited to see Jalen Hurd. He's a really interesting player, like I talked about. He played running back for the Titans along with Alvin Kamara, and then he transferred, and now then he played wide receiver for Baylor and was a really interesting weapon for them. But he big, really big, 6'4", 226 pounds, almost 6'5", and also really strong, 23 bench reps. And how he plays and his skill set is like the discount version of what I see Laviska Shenault being. Right, like Laviska can sometimes be isolated outside. I think that big catch in the end of the game against Nebraska, he was outside, but a lot of times he's doing some motion stuff. He's playing from the slot. He's kind of an H-back wide receiver, tight end. I was talking with a friend of mine, and I talk with him decently regular for BSN, Ryan Konensberg, and he just said Laviska's position is the juggernaut, which I absolutely loved. So seeing how Jalen Hurd works and hearing how he works for this Kyle Shanahan offense has me really intrigued, because then I can just, it's a carbon copy how you're going to use Laviska Shenault in the offense under Rich Scangarello. So I'm excited to see Jalen Hurd. Did you watch the 49ers game last week?
I didn't.
Okay, he had 2 touchdowns, and he was making plays. I mean, the first touchdown he had, he absolutely killed the cornerback, which you don't like to see in preseason, right? No reason to lower your shoulders, and I think he lowered his helmet a little bit too, but he absolutely just killed him across the end zone. And then he had an amazing catch on the outside for a touchdown. So watch for Jalen Hurd, and if you're thinking about it as far as Laviska Shenault and the Broncos, that's the blueprint. Just whatever they do with him, do that in Denver with Laviska Shenault, and everybody wins, right? That's wide receiver round 1, 2020, Carl. It's the dream.
It's happening until it doesn't.
Yeah. And if not, we can live with other things, obviously. It depends on the board falls. Depends where Denver's drafting. We're so far out yet. People are probably, talking about the draft. Turn off. But, it's I'm really interested to see how he can play, because I wasn't sure if Laviska had the speed that I'm looking for the position. But seeing how he's doing with the 49ers, or Hurd is doing with the 49ers, that is, I'm intrigued. So it will be very interested. All right, folks. Well, Carl, I think we got to settle this. I think we got to talk about it a little bit. We have time. It's the end of the podcast. Some people are going to be leaving. Some people haven't stuck around. So we should probably get to it. Guys, Carl and I have been debating, and it is the silverback gorilla versus the grizzly. And I guess I'll give you the floor, Carl. Why are you so wrong in thinking that a silverback would defeat a grizzly in one-on-one combat?
So I just want our listeners, if you haven't checked on Twitter, to see that Nick actually admitted that the gorilla could win.
Okay, but that's like, I don't know if you're just trolling me or if you really believed it, but if it's like 60-1 odds, I might take the gorilla because obviously the payoff is huge.
Right.
But if it's winner take all, $1,000 on the board, grizzly easily.
See, I view this like the Super Bowl 50. Everybody's picking the Panthers, thinking, oh man, their offense, their defense, they're just so strong all around the roster. Just no way the Broncos stand a chance. They've been whooping up on everybody in the playoffs, and boom, Broncos come out and win. And because they had that first big blow. I mean, you think about it, I don't want to bring up Super Bowl 48 a whole lot, but that safety really threw the Broncos completely out for a loop. I know probably wouldn't have won the game either way, but still, that really threw things off. And with the gorilla, this is the big thing. I think if the gorilla can get a very good first hit in, very good chance that they can win that fight. And they have some attacks that the bear just doesn't have the ability to. It can counter in some ways, but I think it would surprise the bear just with the intelligence of the gorilla. That's one big thing. You were talking about it being all-knowing earlier. And how much you want that power. Well, the gorilla, the intelligence compared to the grizzly bear is off the charts. And so the way that a gorilla loves to attack first is to do a jump pound into their opponent.
Okay, this isn't Super Smash Brothers. This is not Donkey Kong.
Well, this is actually what gorillas do, though.
Okay. All right. I figured it's more of a stampede, intimidation factor.
No,
like the gorillas' canines are just for intimidation.
Right. No, this is actually something that they do.
Okay.
So this is one of their main attacks is to go for that big blow right off the bat. They do this big jump, try to come down with all their power into one big hit, and if that lands on the bear, it's game over. That power, we talked about it. There's certain advantages for the bear, there's certain advantages for the gorilla. The gorilla is stronger. He's got better reach. He's got better intelligence. And I do think that, again, just that first ability, he does have a stronger bite too. I know we've talked about it where the bear has more teeth and all those kind of things, and it has the claws. It has the thick skin. It's got the speed advantage, all those kind of things. I just think there's more to what a gorilla brings to the table than what you would think with the bear. I do think it is going to be a little bit more of the one big hit, run. Come back, do another hit, run. I don't think it's going to be a sit there and let's do a boxing match in the middle of the ring, blow for blow. If that happens, bear wins. That's just how that fight's going to go. But if the gorilla can use that intelligence, and I do think the landscape's going to matter.
So boxing ring.
If we're going boxing ring, I'd probably go bear just because it is a small area. The bear with its speed, with its mass, I think it has a bigger advantage. If you get bigger area and ability to change,
levels?
Yeah, levels. There you go. I think the gorilla then begins to get some of the advantage back.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to throw this out there just because we're going to get really nerdy. This really makes me think. You're going with the gorilla, and we're talking about the low odds of the gorilla. Made me think of Lord of the Rings. Gandalf puts his hand on Pippin's head, and he says, "There never was much hope," he answered. "Just a fool's hope, as I've been told." And that's all the gorilla has, just a fool's hope. Because the grizzly, especially those of the Alaskan coast, would demolish a gorilla. I got stats here. Male lowland gorilla. 400 pounds, 6 times the strength, or 6 times stronger than a man. Canines 3 to 4 inches. Massively strong torso and arms. But however, those arms are built for more pulling, because the gorillas use those pulling strengths to pull down shoots of forestation, vegetation to mark territory, as well as get food from that. Running speed up to 35 miles per hour. aggressively defends territory and bullies back members. They win fights by brute strength. However, the male grizzly can weigh 800 pounds, sometimes over 1,000 for those on the Alaska coast. So over 2 times the mass of a gorilla, and has the 5 times the strength of a man. So that's, the gorilla is a little stronger. However, when you put mass into it, we need Kent Lee Platter. You remember him, the RAS guy on Twitter for the draft?
Mm-hmm.
He does that. So with the size advantage, you're actually getting the grizzly being a better athlete. Also, stands 7 foot tall on its massively hind legs. Canines 4 inches. However, those canines are meant for ripping flesh rather than intimidation. And its front claws can be up to 4 inches as well. And there are accounts of grizzly bears decapitating a male bull moose in one swipe. So the physics behind that is incredible. And running speed up to 40 miles per hour for half a mile. You know what the classic saying is when you see a bear as a hiker?
Do the zigzag?
Nope, you don't have to be faster than the bear.
Just faster
you just have
than
to be
the guy next to you? Yep.
Exactly. And also the bear is, it's meant for killing. The gorilla, massive, I think more so in a territorial, sexual manner, fending off competing males. But the bears are built like that for hunting. They kill the largest herbivores in the northern hemisphere in North America: moose, elk, caribou, and those guys have dangerous antlers and also razor-sharp claws. And they are also much more aggressive than a gorilla. Grizzlies have a nasty temperament. A grizzly is actually a better pick than a polar bear because polar bears do not have the nasty temperament of a grizzly. On the open ground, the grizzly's massive bulk, superior bite strength, which because of the canines, literally the teeth are meant for ripping flesh, unlike the gorillas, which are meant for gritting. And claws are a huge advantage. Also, it has a thick hide and body fat distribution combined with superior mass. I would say that negates much of the gorilla's tactical attack points. So the gorilla doesn't have those defenses. It's actually, the flesh is not very thick. It doesn't have a lot of fatty deposits or a thick fur of the grizzly, and doesn't have the teeth or the claws. So, and, typically in the animal world, the animal with the more mass wins. So I think overall, when you come down to it, it's got to be the grizzly. They are just made for killing, where the gorilla is not as much. They haven't evolved to be killing other massive organisms. So I got to go with the grizzly. Mass wins. It's almost twice the size of a gorilla. So, and the picture that I put, I don't know if you saw on Twitter the picture I put, it looks like if it would have been Cam Parker standing next to Derek Wolfe. Cam's not a big guy. Derek Wolfe is an absolutely massive guy. So I think, I don't know, Carl. I know maybe you were just trolling me, but I gotta go with the grizzly bear. And that's not even talking a Kodiak bear. Kodiak bears can weigh up to 1.5 thousand pounds. And I know Eric, actually living up in Alaska, has had a tragedy in his family involving a bear. So bears scare the hell out of me. They're incredible monsters, and I'd love to see a grizzly. I'd rather be up close with a gorilla than a grizzly any day.
All right. Well, here's my final argument. Hollywood. How many movies have they made of bears taking over the world? 0.
How many movies of gorillas?
2.
Not chimps?
Well, okay, 2 different kinds of movies. You got King Kong.
Okay.
And then, of course, Planet of the Apes.
But that's not a gorilla.
Well, gorillas are in there, though.
I don't remember there being gorillas. I remember
there's gorillas. I promise.
Okay. Okay.
No, I guess I haven't really seen those movies a whole lot, but I do know that they're in there.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, if Hollywood believes it, it must be true.
Oh, man. Carl, we need to have a whole different conversation. If that's
okay,
the
so
case.
yes, I might be trolling you a little bit. Honestly,
right.
I probably would say probably 8 times out of 10, I would give it to the bear.
Okay.
But I'd probably give a little bit higher odds to the gorilla than you would.
Also, I think a gorilla would, because they are more intelligent bears, but I think if a gorilla in any sort of capacity came across a bear, it would probably scream at it. If the bear did nothing, that gorilla would get the heck out of there. The smart creatures learn to live to fight another day. And there's a reason it's called guerrilla warfare, right? Throw a rock at him and get the heck out.
Right. Hit and run.
Hit and run. Yep. And it might not, you might not win that battle or anything like that, but you are going to live. Maybe do a little bit of damage, a paper cut, or, whatever, and get the heck out of there. So that's what I think would happen. So you guys tell us, comments on YouTube, Twitter, whatever. I know you guys already kind of commented on that thread that I posted, but it's a fun debate. And, I do not like the Chicago Bears, but grizzly bears, don't mess with me. It scares me, which is kind of ironic because I got the Wonderlost right now. I really want to go to Glacier National Park, which is just littered with grizzlies. So crazy. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. I'm glad we could get the silly talk there at the end, so the people who enjoy it could have enjoyed it instead of at the beginning when some people get a little bit testy about it. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Also make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. Go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a comment, as your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.